800 Central Avenue in Landover, Maryland. Today is Friday. This has been a prosperous week in terms of spiritually. It has been a good week. It's been a week that has been filled with spiritual opportunities. It has also been a week that has given us opportunities to grow spiritually, to draw closer to God, and to one another. Today in the Washington, D.C. area, it's overcast outside. In fact, it's actually raining outside, but it's a slow rain. And I'm glad. I enjoy this type weather. It makes you want to sleep. But the problem is, I don't have time to sleep, so therefore it makes me work. And it makes me work in a way that I look forward to the end of the day. Uh, Two things are happening at the same time, actually, three. Uh, Today is the 25th anniversary of the Million Man March that took place in Washington, D.C. 25 years ago today. Can you imagine that? 25 years ago, there was a Million Man March, predominantly African American men, who came to the Washington, D.C. area from all over the United States of America and some foreign countries. I remember taking my sons down to the National Mall. They were all very young at the time, but it was just a family experience. Those of you in the audience who may have had an opportunity to go, uh, I've got a picture on our refrigerator. In fact, I'm going to post it later today of how young our sons were uh, during the Million Man March. They were actually on television. There was a news crew in the Washington, D.C. area from Memphis, Tennessee. And of all of the people they found me, my sons, and they actually aired that clip in our hometown. And people were calling us saying that they saw my sons on WMC Channel 5 in Memphis, Tennessee area. Also, I remember there was a news crew from Washington, D.C., WUSA 9, and there was a young news crew, Bruce Johnson and Leslie, I can't remember her last name, but they're still with WUSA 9. But they came over to the church where I was preaching uh, and did some videoing there. So it was a fantastic week leading up to it. Preachers, Christians from all over the United States came to Washington to participate in that Million Man March. And I think a lot of families were made the better because of the recommitment, the dedication, the camaraderie that men saw with fathers, sons, grandfathers, grandchildren gathered on the National Mall to celebrate such an occasion as fathers and sons. And the numeric count actually exceeded 1 million people. Another event that's taken place, uh, and I'd never heard of this before, but this is National Boss Day. I've never heard of such a thing, but this is the way for employees to show their appreciation for their supervisors and their directors. And for those bosses that are in the audience today, my hat is off to you, especially during this pandemic, for keeping the ship steady, keeping people employed, keeping people optimistic with hope that their job is stable, and if they're willing to work with you, sometimes scaling back. I just want you to know how much we appreciate that type directive, especially during this time of a pandemic. And then thirdly, this is National Mental Health Awareness Month or week. And what we've done throughout the week is talked about mental health and mental illness. Uh, on yesterday, I mentioned to you that today I wanted to just kind of highlight what happens if we do not take care of our mental health, and what happens if, especially as adult care providers, we fail to not only take care of ourselves, but in the process of neglecting self as adults, what is the long-term future impact that such negligence might have on future generations? There are a couple of personality disorders that do not happen in a vacuum. Uh, you've heard people talk about antisocial personality disorder. Uh, it's simply a mental illness in which a person's thinking, their interaction with others, how they perceive situations is abnormal and downright destructive. Antisocial personality is also known as sociopathic behavior disorder due to the escalation of the severity of the disorder. In other words, it gets worse. Now, individuals who suffer with antisocial personality disorder without fault will continue to violate the rights of others. They will lie. They will have no sense of right or wrong. They behave violently at times and are in frequent conflict with others. And they are in awe of how unjust the world is toward them. Now, that's the amazing phenomena. They are unjust toward the world, but they are in awe of, you see how the world treats me? Uh, the world is out to get me. And the person who's actually acting out the antisocial behavior is that individual. Now, the onset of antisocial personality disorder typically is in early childhood development, typically up by the age of 5. That personality disorder is kind of locked in. And some of the common symptoms of antisocial personality disorder, according to the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, is the person has no boundaries regarding right or wrong as long as it benefits the ill person or their own agenda. As I said earlier, there's chronic lying, there's chronic deceit, and this is what catches people kind of in that web. They will use a false charm and wit to manipulate others into their web of entanglement. Constant conflict with law of expectations. In other words, they are the law, and their law keeps vacillating and moving. Uh, they will therefore constantly violate the rights of other people. They have no problem with strong arm tactics such as intimidation, and they can be very aggressive, and they can potentially show physical violent behaviors. There is a lack of remorse about what they've done to others, what they've said to others. They are very impulsive. So in this moment, their behaviors can be here. The next moment, their behaviors can be over here. And they are quick to get very agitated. Uh, and they are very abusive in relationships. And they have a strong, strong inability to work properly with other people. Now, I want you to keep in mind what I've just shared with you about antisocial personality disorder, because that is sort of a broad sweep, but there's a more concentrated uh, personality disorder or mental illness within that sometimes fly below the radar. Now, it has the components of antisocial personality disorder built into it, but this one flies below the radar. And sometimes people just throw up their hands and say, I have no idea how to communicate with this person. I have no idea what they are talking about half the time. And sometimes the frustration comes out that, and I don't think they have any idea what they're talking about. Uh, we call this borderline personality disorder. Now, borderline personality, let me define it. Borderline personality is a disorder in which there is a pervasive pattern of instability of one's self image, their own interpersonal relationships, and their own mood. Uh, this starts very early in their own personal life developmental process. Here's what typically you can bank on with a person who has borderline personality disorder. The place they were raised in, they were exposed to some level, a high level of trauma, emotional trauma, physical trauma, uh, financial trauma, sexual trauma, but it always has its own set and some layer of traumatization. Uh, the challenge is because people typically don't like to deal with their own source of trauma, that's where you get this flowery image that they came from, and they'll communicate this. I came from a good home. My parents were this, my parents were this. I grew up with this, and I grew up, and many times that is a cover up for their own low self image. And they began to project out on others their own pain and their own shame. Here are some signs of borderline personality disorder: making frantic efforts to avoid the real or their imagined abandonment. In other words, they will do whatever is necessary to shield from people what really happened in their development. They will have a pattern of unstable relationships that are often characterized by idealizing or devaluing a person, also known as they have black or it's either black or white. That's how they think. It's either A or B. Now, for most people, it's between A and B, and then there's that gray area in between. But for a person with borderline personality disorder, it's either black or white. Now, let me translate. It's either my way or no way. And if it's no way, then crucifixion is inevitable. Devaluation is inevitable. Trying to humiliate is inevitable. So their A is it's my way. Their B is I will crucify you if you disagree with me. They struggle with unstable self-image. That's their own instability, but they will project it off on others as if the other person is unstable in their self-image or their own identity. And this can frustrate people in that the person can just over and over and over again communicate that narrative that something must be wrong with you, something must be wrong with you, something must be wrong with you, that if the person who's fairly stable is not careful, they will go out seeking to remedy what the person who's unstable has created by a false narrative. Uh, their engagement is typically very risky and very impulsive. Uh, so what happens is they know that how they communicate with people, uh, that person can say, you know what, you need help. And they run the risk of somebody saying, there's something wrong with you. And they also run the risk of somebody saying, I'm not putting up with your foolishness. But what they also bank on is because of their finesse, because of their way to just kind of be social butterflies in their popularity, they are willing to risk that most people are not going to call them out because they might be wrong, but most of the time you're not wrong, you're right. Let's talk about borderline personality disorder, and this is a word that is bigger than it sounds, lability. Lability is very simple. Lability is the rapid shifting of mood from calm to anger about opinions and behaviors that is completely out of line with the supporting evidence. So, a person with borderline personality disorder, it's also compounded by their rapid shifting of mood. One moment they're calm, one day they're calm, and the next thing you know, they are angry. And their anger is disproportionate uh, based on what normal people's response would be. So it's simply the rapid shifting of mood from calm to anger about opinions and behaviors that are completely out of line with the supporting events. For instance, it's raining outside. Today it's rainy, it's clearing up now. But a person with borderline personality disorder would get so irritated if they went outside and let's say the car is not garaged and the window is open about an eighth of an inch. Okay? That person could explode and say, you left the windows down on the car and the car got wet inside. And look at what happened inside this car. And it's all your fault. And I just can't believe that you would be so irresponsible that you would leave the windows down in the car. And you're saying, wait a minute now. I didn't leave the windows down. Yes, you did. Well, I left the window cracked. No, you left the windows down. Do you see the supporting event says you left the window cracked? But that person's opinion and their behavior and their escalation of anger would leave the whole world to believe that you literally left the window down. That's the lability. It's their rapid shifting of mood from calm to anger about opinions and behaviors that are completely out of line with the supporting events. You're saying, well, that's down. And you're saying, wait a minute, technically, but realistically, no. And they will get a line of people to line up behind them to confirm their opinion about what down means. Now, many of the symptoms of borderline personality disorder involves difficulty in managing or regulating one's own emotions. According to the DSM, the fifth edition, this is the reference manual that we as clinicians use to do specific diagnoses of abnormal behaviors. Uh, it outlines several difficulties with emotions. One is anger. People with borderline personality disorder may display inappropriate and intense anger about things that really don't matter that much. In terms of their emotional lability, uh, those with borderline personality disorder experience unstable emotions and frequent mood changes. Emotions are easily triggered and are typically inappropriate, or they are disproportionate to the circumstances. In other words, the old saying that we used to have is people will create a mountain out of a molehill. Uh, and it's because they've got to show that they are more knowledgeable, that they know more about it, and that especially if it in their opinion goes against them, you have ruined me. You have humiliated me. And you're saying, no, I didn't. That wasn't the intent. That wasn't the motive. But on the other hand, if they've done something and it was wrong, if they've done something and it wasn't just toward another, then they would say, I don't see why you're making such a big deal out of this. You just overblow everything. You must be a very sensitive person. Everything, but again, that's their emotional insecurity. On one hand, they're going to protect themselves from everything. And then on the other hand, they expect for you to protect them from everything. But the greater question is, who's protecting you? That leads to their insecurity. Often, individuals with borderline personality disorder are insecure in interpersonal relationships. They regularly assume that other people will leave them or reject them, potentially leading to frantic efforts to avoid this. Now, they know that if the behaviors that they are meting out, uh, if they were the recipients of those behaviors, they know they wouldn't put up with it for a minute. So deep in the back of their mind, because they are acting so inappropriate and so disproportionate to the events, they are always worried. When will this person leave me? Because if I was that person, I'd leave me too. When will this person blow up on me? Because if I was that person, I'd certainly blow up on them. I wouldn't take this for 30 seconds. So they know that their behaviors are inappropriate. And their insecurity is driven by, deep down inside of them, they know they wouldn't tolerate it. They would not put up with it. And they are afraid that somebody is going to stand up at some point and say to them, the heck with you. If this is your inappropriateness and if this is the way you've made it through the day, then you have at it, but you have at it by yourself. But their greatest fear, their greatest anxiety is being alone. They are very impulsive. In response to a lot of the stimulus, people with borderline personality disorder often respond erratically and may engage in dangerous behaviors. They'll make threats, that they'll throw things, they'll scream, they'll yell, but it's because they know they are basically losing control. And whenever they feel like things are getting beyond their control, they will start impulsiveness. They will start talking just kind of off the cuff. They'll start making threats. They'll start demoralizing, humiliating. And you're saying, where is this coming from? They are throwing everything at the situation, including the kitchen sink, hoping that something sticks. Uh, and the sad thing is, they really know what they're doing. Let me mention something to you about people with borderline personality disorder. If you were to do an intelligence quotient, an IQ test on them, they are very, very intelligent people, highly intelligent people. Most people with borderline personality disorder will have an IQ beyond like 110, 115. They are very intellectual people. Therefore, they cannot pretend that they're dumb. That's what I'm trying to get you to see. You say, oh, they're just crazy. They're just stupid. No, 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 no. Far from it. Because they constantly think that they can outthink and outmaneuver and outmanipulate everybody. Borderline personality is an illness marked by an ongoing pattern of varying moods, self-image, and behavior. These symptoms often result in impulsive actions and problems in relationships. People with borderline personality disorder may experience intense episodes of anger, intense episodes of depression, and intense episodes of anxiety that might last from a few hours to a few days. And this is according to the National Institute of Health. I want you to know, without a doubt, that this is a serious disorder, and this is a disorder that typically does not go away magically. There is no magic bullet for borderline personality disorder or the bigger antisocial personality disorder. As a matter of fact, I want to tell you something that might not sound too optimistic. If God doesn't change the spirit of that person, there are not many people around who have the ability to change the spirit of a person with an antisocial personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. Every sample, every illustration of this in the Bible, it was God who changed the person. You will not see where another individual was able to prick the heart of an antisocial personality person or a borderline personality person. It's bigger than people. And when God intervenes, then it's God who can fix that person. But I've heard people say, well, I think I can change them, and I think I can love them out of it, and I think they thrive on conflict, so you can't fight them out of it because they feel like people haven't loved them. You can't love them out of it because they have an animosity toward God, sort of a mixed relationship. You can't pray them out of it. So it's God who does the intervention. It's God who has to deal with Nebuchadnezzar. It's God who has to deal with Pharaoh. It's God who has to deal with Saul in the Old Testament. It's God who has to deal with Nabal in the Old Testament. It's God who has to deal with Saul in the New Testament. I'm telling you that many times as human beings, we venture into territory to repair people that only God can repair. I hope our lessons on mental illness and mental health has been a blessing to you, because the conclusion for this week's series is we will find people who are mentally well in the church that are addressing their mental health, and that is indeed a blessing. But I have to tell you also, there are people in the church who are dealing with mental illness as well. And when we close our eyes and we try to pretend that it is not in the religious circles, then we're setting ourselves up to become victimized by those individuals who are really, really in need of the help that can only come from the Lord. I want to encourage you that if you're dealing with this, call on God to reveal to you and to give you the strength and the courage to accept the reality of This is who this person is. And if you are in danger or endangerment because of that, uh, at some point the realization has to kick in. This person is going to hurt me. They can hurt you emotionally. They can damage you spiritually, or they can physically do harm to you. They can do harm to your children, and they can destroy a church. Uh, One of the things that we are talking about as we study the book of Acts is how people are dead set on disrupting the missionary journeys of Paul. How Paul was dead set on killing Christians. See, don't miss that. Saul was so irate that he wanted to kill Christians, and he did consent to the stoning of Stephen. I want you to see how serious this matter really is. Will you pray with me at this time? Father, we thank you so much for your word. We thank you for opportunities like these that we can come together in a midday environment and simply encourage one another, strengthen one another, build each other up, and to raise the awareness, the consciousness, even in church settings, about sometimes the brokenness of people and how we must be aware of what they're doing or attempting to do to disrupt our spiritual journey. Father, I pray that your intervention will change the hearts of men and women who are broken. And I pray, Father, that our love and our patience and our joy will not be taken away because of the brokenness of others. We pray that you will watch over us as your people. We pray that your continual grace will be over this world, and that you will alleviate in your purpose time this pandemic that we find ourselves in at this moment. We love you. We thank you so much for your grace over our lives. Through Jesus I pray. Amen. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday if you've been socially distancing. We have Bible study at 9 o'clock a.m. followed by worship at 10 o'clock a.m. And we also, if you're not comfortable coming into the church building, you can come to the parking lot. Tune your FM radio to 88.7 and you'll get to enjoy from the parking lot everything that's taking place inside the building. You can come to the door if you like. We make sure that you get the communion so you can participate in that. If you need to use the bathroom facilities while on the parking lot, certainly accommodations will be made for you. But we just look forward to seeing you. If you've not been in proximity of those who've been exposed to the COVID-19 virus, and if you've been practicing proper socially distancing, come in and worship with us this Lord's Day. God bless you, and I just pray that you'll enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Oh, don't forget the family prayer. Oh, Jesus, yes, it will get you there. Oh, when we all get together, hey, don't forget to do no. You know prayer will sail across the ocean. I know it will. Prayer will bring your wandering son back home. Sure enough it will. I know prayer will help you love your enemy. Sure enough it will. I know prayer will teach you right from wrong. Yeah, Lord have mercy this evening. Family prayer. I know my right there. Oh, when we all got together. Oh, don't forget all family prayer. Listen, I know prayer will. Sail across the ocean, sure enough it will. Faster than a plane can go. Oh yes it will. I know prayer will. Oh yeah. Help you in time of trouble. Oh yes it will. I know prayer will. Prayer will. Give you strength. Yes it will. Oh, don't you know? Yeah. Lord have mercy this evening. Family prayer. I know the Lord will meet you right there. When we all got together. Yeah. Forget all our family prayer. Come on, Robert. You know prayer will help you in a time of sorrow. Oh, yes, it will. Lord, prayer. I know prayer will bring peace into your home. Sure enough, it will. Oh, yes, it will. Lord, prayer. I know prayer. Help you sleep at night. Oh, yes, it will. Just like a